So I've received a couple of requests to do poems by Edgar Allan Poe, and I've decided to do a couple that I think go together pretty well. So these two poems are Annabel Lee and Lenore. And the reason why I chose these two together, for those of you who may not have read one or both or are not as familiar, because both poems are about the loss of a loved one. And another request I had received is to read something about the loss of a loved one, so I figured it fit quite nicely. So this copy, this is just the smallest, or I guess easiest to find copy that I own. I do have a big fat Poe book, but I figured just reading the poems it would be easier to pick it out of this tiny little thing than to have this fat thing. So this is The Raven and Other Favorite Poems. I might do The Raven video at some point in the future, if you guys are interested, but for now I'm just going to do this one. So, one thing I like about this is the poems are listed in chronological order, and for those of you who have seen my the videos of my poetry, you know how much I like chronological order. And they have the years the poems were written. I guess some of these poems took multiple years to write, but the first one is Lenore, which was between 1831 and 1849, which, that must just be an estimate. It can't have taken him, almost 20 years to write this poem. So, anyway, there you go. Okay. Lenore. Ah, broken is the golden bowl, the spirit flown forever. Let the bell toll, a saintly soul floats on this Stygian river. And Guy de Vere, hast thou no tear? Weep now or nevermore. See, on yon drear and rigid bier, low lies thy love, Lenore. Come, let the burial rite be read, the funeral song be sung, an anthem for the queenliest dead that ever died so young, a dirge for her the doubly dead in that she died so young. Wretches, ye loved her for her wealth and hated her for her pride, and when she fell in feeble health, ye blessed her that she died. How shall the ritual then be read, the requiem how be sung, by you, by yours the evil eye, by yours the slanderous tongue, that did to death the innocent that died, and died so young? Peccavimus, but rave not thus, and let a Sabbath song go up to God, so solemnly the dead may feel no wrong. The sweet Lenore hath gone before, with hope that flew beside, leaving thee wild for the dear child that should have been thy bride. For her the fair and debonair that now so lowly lies, the life upon her yellow hair, but not within her eyes, the life still there upon her hair, the death upon her eyes. Avaunt tonight, my heart is light, no dirge I will upraise, but waft the angel on her flight, with a pain of old days. Let no bell toll, lest her sweet soul, amid its hallowed mirth, should catch the note as it doth float up from this damned earth. To friends above, from fiends below, the indignant ghost is riven, from hell unto a high estate far up within the heaven, from grief and groan to a golden throne beside the King of heaven. So this one is very heavily into the whole death of the innocent, which is very different from Annabel Lee in that Annabel Lee does focus a little bit on the love aspect, and Lenore focuses a little bit more on the death aspect. But these were written, let's see, and Lenore was between 1831 and 1849. Annabel Lee was written between 1849 and 1850, which is not too helpful because they could have been written in the same year, or they could have been written 20 years apart. Oh, I wish we had a better idea of when these were written, but alas. So I will read to you Annabel Lee, and then we can I hope that sound wasn't too annoying, and then we can discuss the differences. So here's Annabel Lee. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived, whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child, in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee. With a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted her and me. And this was the reason that long ago, in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee. So that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me, to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, this was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we, and neither the angels in the heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea, can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of the beautiful Annabel Lee, and the stars never rise but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so all the night tide I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in the sepulchre there by the sea, in the tomb by the sounding sea. Alright, so both of these poems, like I mentioned, run on the same theme, and I've mentioned in a few other videos about how the poems will link to the poet's life, and this is one of those where it is very much true. These, I believe, aren't the only two poems that focus on the themes of loss of innocence and death at a young age, and that is because Poe's own wife died at a very young age. Now that is to say, he married a woman who was half his age when they married, which is really, really creepy nowadays. I don't know how much more acceptable it was at the time. I'm guessing it was from the sound of other things that I've read and heard of and my familiarity with that period of time, but he was 26 and she was 13, and I do know that they did have to get married in secret, but I think that was more because of, well, there's also the fact that they were direct cousins, which, again, this is, of the time, appropriate, of current times not so much, but They were married for, I want to say, 10 years before she died. And I believe she died of some sort of sickness. I don't know for sure. So, this is thought to have inspired these two poems as well as perhaps many of his others. Maybe this is also why it's unknown exactly when these poems were written, because, I mean, I do know that writing was, it was very difficult to be a writer in these times. He was one of the first Americans to make a living off of writing alone, so that's why he's written so much. I mean, these are just his poems. He's written all of these poems, as well as, these. And on top of that, short stories like The Telltale Heart and The Cask of Amontillado and stuff like that. So, he did a good amount of writing in his day, which, again, makes sense because he was living off of it. There were a lot of issues with copyright because a lot of publishers at the time would rather just steal works from authors elsewhere in the world, like in the UK, and republish them than publish new American authors. So it was very difficult to get published at the time, much less to actually make a living like Poe did. But yeah, another thing I wanted to bring up is because I've done videos on Lolita and I've mentioned things like I've pointed out lines like in my Lolita video, and I think in the poems from the Lolita video I pointed out bits that make allusions to Poe, so I felt like I should probably point out these bits in Annabel Lee specifically, because that's what he refers to. In the book Lolita, there is a character named Annabel Lee, who is a direct allusion to Annabel Lee. And the story with her goes basically as it does in this poem, where the narrator of Lolita, Humbert, met her when they were both young. They were both 13 at the time, which, again, that's how old Poe's wife was when she was married, and I don't think it says in the poem, but I believe that's how old Annabel Lee was in this. I don't know where I read that, though. But anyway, two young kids fall in love and have their relationship and are totally and helplessly in love with each other, and then she dies of sickness. Same thing in Annabel Lee. We talk about the wind chilling and killing her, which is assumed to be hypothermia. Whereas in Lolita, Annabel Lee dies of typhus. And again, Annabel Lee is a lot more focusing on the love story aspect, whereas Lenore focuses a lot more on the fact that she is dead. So they don't really mention, like they say, oh, thy love Lenore, but they don't really talk much about that love story. They talk about her going up to God. They bring up heaven a lot, and the King of Heaven. But they're very different poems, stylistically, in this sense. Another thing is, there is an alternate interpretation of Annabel Lee that I've read a little bit about. And that is that Annabel Lee is actually the name of a ship. And I still like it better as the Loss of a Loved One poem, because it's very sweet, and that's how it's been primarily, primarily seen. It's been primarily viewed as a love poem, and that's all, ever since it's been written, how people have interpreted it. But I think there is a song that a friend of mine showed me that I have since forgotten the name of, that is a song that was written about Annabel Lee, given the interpretation of it being about a ship. So basically, because they talk about the sea a lot, because they talk about the wind coming, chilling and killing her, you know, the idea is this man lost his ship in a shipwreck, and because at the time it was very common that, you know, these boats had female names, and that a captain of a ship had a relationship with his ship akin to a man and his girlfriend or wife. So, and then, let's see, other mentions like they loved with a love that was more than love, or they refer to her as a maiden, which is what they would talk about, how they would talk about ships. And then at the beginning, the thought that it says, "It was many and many a year ago in the kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know." And the thought is that why, if Annabel Lee was a 13-year-old girl, why would this man be telling this story, saying, "Oh, you might have heard of her"? Because no one will have heard of a 13-year-old girl who dies of hypothermia. But if there is a shipwreck, and the captain comes out alive, and the ship is destroyed, that people will have heard of. So, that is, it's a very interesting interpretation. I really like the love story aspect, so I don't really like it as much, but perhaps some of you might. I wish there was more information about Lenore, but since Annabel Lee is a far more popular poem, there's a lot more you can find in it. And I think also because it's a lot more direct in the way that it is written. The English is a lot more similar to, the way we speak today in Lenore. There are so many words that I have probably mispronounced when I was reading it. But, yeah, very different styles, written about basically the same thing, unless you go by the ship metaphor, in which case one's about a ship and the other's about a girl. But anyway, there you go. That is Lenore and Annabel Lee by Edgar Allan Poe. And that, I think, is all that I have to say about those two poems. So I'll see you guys next time.